Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest panel in the Sustainable Fashion Forum's month-long lineup of fashion horror stories. Today, I'm joined by three amazing women, Kayti, Adila, and Veronica, and we're talking about all things greenwashing in the fashion industry and how to combat them using transparency. My name is Emma Lely. I am the Senior Sustainability Editor at mindbodygreen, where I report on multiple facets of sustainability and how they relate to human health. So I'm really excited to be here today. And I will let our guests go and tell you a little bit about themselves and their experience in the fashion industry. Kayti, can you kick it off?
Hi, everyone. I am Kayti, the founder and creative director of Mate the Label. We are a clean essentials brand sustainably made in Los Angeles. We use natural, non-toxic, and organic materials for our product. And we launched our Dress Clean initiative in early 2018. And that is really when we decided to take a look at the fashion industry, not for just its impact on the environment and also ethical manufacturing, but we really pivoted to start thinking about how disruptive and dangerous the industry is to human health. So yeah, that's a little bit about us.
Adila, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Adila. So a little bit about me. I've been in the industry for about 15 years now, working with offshore manufacturers. I specialize in helping brands manufacture overseas. And I'm the author of the book Source My Garment, where it's kind of a step-by-step guide of how to get from idea to manufacture and how to do it responsibly. My mission for all these years has really been to humanize the garment industry and really be more transparent about how things are made and who is making them. This year, I launched the brand called The Good Tea, which is all fair trade cotton certified, and it's all our whole supply chain is completely transparent, and that's kind of a little bit about me. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica. I'm very happy to be on this panel. I'm the founder and CEO of a brand called Everybody and Everyone. We're an eco-innovative, size-inclusive women's wear brand. And we have high-tech, interesting eco-innovative materials, such as our trousers made from fermented sugar. But then we also use lower tech in terms of design, where those same pair of trousers are adjustable at the waist and also adjustable at the length, like 3 lengths. So a lot of our clothes are adjustable and removable, or you can tie them up in the front or wear them in different ways so that people can extend the life of the garments. And of course, all our materials are eco and innovative, but also our buttons, our labels, our hang tags, our packaging, we consider all those things and making sure that we choose the most sustainable option there is available. And also where our factories are located are often close by together. So, and the brand is size inclusive. So it's called Everybody and Everyone.
Amazing. Well, I'm super excited to dive in with everyone. And to kick things off, in keeping with our sort of like spooky theme way of going, I'd love if everyone can share a fashion horror story that kind of got them into the business. So what is it about the fashion industry that, made you think there's a real problem here and I need to get involved somehow? I know, Veronica, you started sharing yours with us earlier and it sounded really interesting. So let's start with you.
Yeah, so I grew up in the fashion industry because my family had knitwear and denim factories. So as a child and teenager, I'd go and ask, why is it so dusty? What is this smell? And where is all this colored water going? And of course, I didn't really get much answers back then. But as I started being in the industry, I asked more and more of these questions and really try to figure out how our clothes are actually made, what's in our clothes, and all these questions. And I mean, my first business was bringing mass market American brands to China. And that was a lot of products in, we opened 1,000 stores in the second and the third tier cities in China. And it was no sustainability back then. And I didn't feel right inside of me. And I think it's put me on this journey of figuring out how we can make clothes. I think we still need to be clothed, Of course, we need to consume less as people, as humans, but when we do need to make something, how can we make it where it doesn't hurt our planet? And maybe how can we make it that it actually does better for planet and for people? And so we have some solutions, and still working on a lot.
Great. Kayti, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. It's hard to definitely pinpoint one specific thing since there's so many. But one thing comes to mind when I was conceptualizing Dress Clean, because I have been in this industry for about 7 years, and we didn't launch that initiative until about two and a half years ago. So we really did like a big transition. And during that time, there was a story that I was listening to on a podcast about this woman who was an organic cotton farmer, and she was married to a man that lived on conventional cotton farms his whole life, and he passed away from a brain tumor. And in his area in Texas, there was really high rates of different chronic illnesses, diseases, tumors, cancer, etc. And that sort of made me start realizing that and looking into more about pesticides and how we're actually wearing, clothing that is using pesticides, and sort of really sparked something inside of me. So I realized too, there's over like 1 million pesticide poisonings a year across the globe. So it was really that connection for me that helped me sort of conceptualize what was important for us moving forward.
Yes, so I guess I should go. So I guess there's been a lot of horror stories for me, but I think one of the bigger ones was kind of a little bit of a progression for me. I travel overseas, especially to India, almost every year. And over the years, just I've built so many relationships with so many different factories, and I've really got a really good hold of the supply chain and how it works. And I think like just even after I got out of school, I didn't realize like how many people are involved in the supply chain. Everybody's like, oh, where's your factory? But that's not where the magic happens. It happens right from, like, as Kayti was saying, like right from the farmer. Like if you're using like natural fibers, there's like the dyer, the knitter, the weaver, the ginner, there's like the printer, there's labels, there's your notions. Like there's so many people involved. And I feel so fortunate that I have such great relationships with different factories. I've gotten a chance to meet all these people, and it was so crazy that even like different factories, I'd be like, come with, like the owners, I'd be like, come with me, right? And they'd be like, I had no idea. Like they're so consumed in their own work, they don't even know what's going on with the other people. They're like, wow, I didn't know that so much work went into it. And I think, as much as like, it's not as much as a horror story for that part of it, but I just really felt like I really want to be a voice for, all the makers overseas, because there's so much care and love that goes into it. And like, I know the Bangladesh thing happened, and it was such a negative thing, and it really set so many people off that, like, there's so many bad situations out there, but there's so many good people out there as well. And the other thing is that the relationships that I've built over the years, they've really opened up to me and told me a lot of things that have happened overseas. And, a lot of my clients come to me and they're afraid to work overseas. They're like, oh no, what if they don't ship my goods? Or what if they send me crappy products? But you know what? 90% of the time, it's not that. It's like what we could have done better for the delivery. But when I hear their stories, they're scared just as well. And they've told me stories. Like I've had one of my mentors, he actually told me he had almost close to $1 million worth of merchandise where the company just canceled the order. And he's like, he needs to pay so many people. What do I do with this stuff? And like, I've had other people like, I have this product, can you help me move it? So many people are doing it. And like these bigger companies, they'll open letters of credit that state that you have the money in the account. So then the factories think that, oh yeah, they have money, but there's no rules to that, and they can actually break these LCs, and they're like, sorry, we're not going to ship. And it's like, it's so sad. And I think that's what really got me into this industry. And just like Katie was saying about the farmers as well, as I learn more and more, it just makes me more committed, gives me more fuel to do better. And as I was traveling overseas as well, I started reading articles about farmers committing suicide. And I feel really bad because I didn't really realize how scary it is. Like, I read like 100 or 200 farmers, and it was like literally, like, to be honest with you, like 2 paragraphs. And you're like, it doesn't really like register like, oh yeah, this is a big problem. And I think about it, and then it went away. And then as I was writing the book Source My Garment, I started I was validating everything that I was saying. I have to collect research, right? So I was studying like fair trade cotton, and there were statistics that was close to 300,000 farmers since 2005 have committed suicide. That's like 1,600 a year. That is freaking crazy. If that happened in North America, we'd be flipping out, and nobody there is like, it just felt like nobody's even talking about this. Isn't this a big issue? So that's when I decided to launch the Good Tea, and I got it Fair Trade Cotton certified. So yeah, these are like some of the sad stories that I've heard overseas. I mean, we could talk about this for days, but it's so depressing. But yeah, these are kind of some of the horror stories that really have, I think, brought me to where I am today.
Yeah, it's crazy. There are a lot of horror stories that come from someone into this industry, which is kind of frightening to think about. And think about my own journey. I think the thing that first kind of was like the aha, like yikes moment for me was just seeing the amount of waste associated with it. Like, I live in New York City, and when I go to the farmers market, some days there would be like a textile return pile, and it would just be like bags and bags and bags of used clothing by the end of the day. And there's just, it's great because people are, not sending it to landfill, but it's just scary to think about how much overproduction there is and how much people are buying and not really getting that much use out of it at all. So there are definitely a lot of issues to
and if you want to see a horror picture of that, there's on Instagram, there's an organization called the OR Foundation, like OR, and they work in Ghana, and they have piles and mountains of clothes that are from the privileged world that we live in, and they call it the dead white man's clothing, but those images are absolutely heartbreaking.
Right. And it goes back to what you were talking about too, Adila, just the fact that a lot of these people are like canceling orders, but it's like, what happens to those clothes then? There's no real solution. So I guess to build a foundation for the talk today, I'm curious to hear a little bit more from each of you about how you actually define sustainability, as well as greenwashing, and how greenwashing kind of undermines sustainability from your perspective. Veronica, let's start with you.
So I'm not defining this, but this is from Sir David Attenborough. And he says, anything we can't do forever is by definition unsustainable. So I think that's something that I always try to keep in mind, and yeah, that's what it means. And like, in a way, of course, we're talking about ecology sustainability, but that's also true for business sustainability. For my brand, we look at it, and I think the first thing we did is to see everything that we need to use, do we have to use it? And if we do have to use it, is there a more sustainable option? And I think there's simple trades that, I think most of the people in the industry know, like using organic cotton versus regular cotton. That's a easy one to do, but is there something that's even better? Our brand, we use things like linen and hemp. Hemp uses way less water, but then even in cotton now is there a regenerative cotton? And so, for example, this silk shirt that I'm wearing is grown by regenerative farming methods, and what it does is regenerative farming methods sequesters more carbon dioxide into the soil, so that's better for the planet. And because the farmers have to do rotational cropping as well, the farmers actually make more money throughout the year. And with COVID, it's really shown what happened was the farmers' silk need was much lower. And so how do they compensate for everything? If they were only growing the mulberry trees for the silkworms, then they wouldn't have that much income. But because they've been already doing regenerative farming for a couple of years, they're selling eggs for the ducks and all these different types of products throughout the year. And the farmers' livelihood was not hurt as bad. And it was actually fine through COVID. So regenerative farming is definitely a thing that I think can help a lot of, can help the planet and also help the people.
And what about greenwashing? What do you think about kind of the definition there and sort of the harm that it can play?
I think for greenwashing, it just confuses people. And like, I think so much of sustainability is about education. I've been in this for 7 years now, and I'm still learning new things. And so for someone who's completely new to it, when people put out information that's tricking people, it just makes our whole mission much more harder. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that sustainability, that word, is just so overused. It's kind of lost its meaning. And I think that as brands and consumers, we kind of have to define it for ourselves and sort of go into it having some knowledge around what it means to you, and creating sort of like an assessment toolkit of sorts of like, because what it means to me is going to be slightly different to what it means to someone else. So the way we approach sustainability at Mate is that we really look at the full life cycle of a garment, including the afterlife. And we're really sort of focused on every single step and how that affects everyone in the supply chain, the health in particular. So, when we're looking at people in factories, are the materials that we're using, are they clean for them to be in the room with, in terms of what they're touching, absorbing, what's in the air? In factories, there's hundreds of thousands of microfibers that are just flowing around at any given time. So we have to, for us, we're really focused on not using synthetics because of that issue, because they are derived from petroleum and are essentially plastic. So we're really aware of every single step, of our garment, and we're really focused on offering the cleanest product possible that is healthier for people in the supply chain and the consumer. And then we also, it's very important for us to be thinking about the afterlife, because, this community I know is, aware about circularity and its importance, and the emergence of that is so important just because of all the waste that we described. So we only use natural fibers, and 95% of those are organic, which means we sort of designed, Mate and the product that we use to be circular in a way that it's able to biodegrade and degrade naturally. And then we're also, in the next stages of having and building our circular model, where we actually have fiber to fiber recycling and a take back program for our consumers, as well as we're collecting all of our fabric scraps from the cutting floor too. So I think it's really important when thinking through sustainability that it's really a holistic perspective that we have to approach. It can't just be one collection. It can't just be our packaging. It can't just be, fair wages. It's sort of a all-encompassing, full perspective on, what it means. And then with greenwashing, exactly what Veronica was saying is that it's difficult when we have bigger brands or even smaller brands too. There's really a lack of education. There's a lot of self-regulating in this industry and self-promotion without third parties sort of coming in and identifying what is quote unquote, sustainable. So the greenwashing, it's definitely difficult when brands like ours are doing so much work, and it does take so much time and investment to do these things, that it's difficult when other brands sort of come in and slap on a label just because they have a few SKUs and aren't fully encompassing like overall what it means to be sustainably, holistically as well.
So for me, I think sustainability really is a word I think that everybody has to define for themselves. I kind of think that it's, or say to people, it's using the word stress. What does that mean? Stress could mean to some people it's anger, it's worry, it's different things. So I think when you ask somebody, what does sustainability mean to you? I think that's kind of where you get a better understanding, because everybody has a little bit of a different definition of it. For me, I believe sustainability means balancing the 3 Ps: profit, planet, and the people. And profit, yeah, you have to be profitable in business to survive. Otherwise, you won't have a business. Planet, to me, is like the environment. And I love what Kayti said about the whole design life cycle. That is so important. We address that with the good tea. And if you go to our website too, we kind of show you like all the different steps, starting from, the fiber, the manufacturing phase. Shipping is so important as well. Like we ship by sea, because overseas, if you ship by air, that causes a lot of like carbon emissions. And then the use phase, just like Kayti was saying, is, we use cotton because it's more of a natural fiber. I much rather be eating cotton than plastic, which is kind of like nylon and like acrylic. So, and then of course, end of life. So profit, planet, and people, that's where like my real driver is really the whole supply chain transparency. With a good tea, we tell you everything right from where our farm is, the dyer, the knitter, where our notions are coming from, right to our warehouse, which I think, which is so great about startups. I think startups can really set an example of, how things should be done, because we have the most control of like where things are being made. Whereas these bigger corporations, they have no clue where things are being made. They hire an agent, then the agent like outsources, and then they don't even know where anything is. And then the other thing I think with greenwashing to me is misinformation. And, and they're just being like, oh, yeah, I'm okay. But then, like when people say, yeah, I'm okay, but you don't really tell you like really like the details. Like if you really want to know information, like if they're greenwashing or not, they can validate it. And they won't just say that where the factory is. They should be transparent about everything. It's not just like I was saying where the factory is. And I think you can see that. You can tell the authenticity of a brand just by their storytelling. Like how descriptive are they? And like, are these companies validating what they're saying? Like for us, the good tea, we decided to get B Corp certified. I don't know if you all are familiar with B Corp certification, and that was a long process, but it really kind of, they make you validate everything that you're saying. Like just because I'm fair trade cotton certified doesn't mean like, oh, I get my certification. It's just such a great way to validate, what we're doing. So I think like B Corps are amazing. And then the other thing about greenwashing that I just wanted to add also is you can tell if a company is being authentic or not, because are they educating you? Like you can feel good if a brand is trying to help you in some way. Like, it could be as small as is like for the good tea with regards to washing, we've put into the care instructions, like how to be more sustainable, like environmentally friendly when you're washing your clothes. So like little things like that. But I love everything everybody said, and I agree wholeheartedly with everybody. And yeah, these are just my other add-ons to what everyone was saying.
Yeah, it's great to hear how everyone's really like, doing the work and approaching sustainability in, like you're saying, Kayti, such like a holistic sort of 360 way. And I love that you kind of started to dive into this a bit, Adila, but I'm curious to hear, with greenwashing, it can be difficult to identify sometimes, no matter how educated the consumer is. But I'm curious if you have any sort of tips or like best practices that you like to use even when shopping, yourselves to kind of, spot like, that claim seems pretty unsubstantiated, or any sort of tips you use when navigating a website or even just, a label.
I kind of feel, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody feels differently, but I feel like the smaller brands seem to be a lot more authentic. And I feel like their heart is in the right place with what they're doing. You can see, like, if you go to the About Us page, like, what is their mission? Like, nobody's going to be 100% sustainable. Like, let's be honest here. That's not even like, it's not. At the end of the day, we're creating a product. It's going somewhere. We're having an impact. So, like, just see, like, what are the people's values? You know, I think that, like, these bigger corporations are really like feeling it now because consumers are really purchasing, like, we have the purchasing power to make change. And I think, you know, Forever 21 closed, I believe, for a reason, because more and more, especially the millennials, which are so amazing, they care about where things are made, how things are made. And it's more about like buying less, buying good quality pieces that aren't going to go to the landfill. And just purchasing from, I believe, smaller brands. And I think we could educate ourselves with quality of a garment. Like, does the fabric look like it's going to be more lasting? Can you see the seams? Like, do they look durable? Is it going to fall apart? I think that's a really great way to see if something is sustainable. I know you said greenwashing, but I'm kind of like going in different sort of
Yeah, no,
but just a tip of like how to, I guess, shop more sustainably.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I love that too, because it kind of goes back to this idea that, you know, brands kind of do have to start defining sustainability for themselves, just because there is no one universal definition and it gets thrown around so much. So I think that tip of like finding how a company defines sustainability and finding how they're tracking towards that goal, and also how they might not be meeting up to that goal, I think that's important too, is kind of sharing, you know, the progress that you've made, but also the steps that you still need to take. Because like you said, you know, we're never going to be, well, hopefully one day, but as of now, no one is 100%, you know, sustainable in that sense. Cool. Kayti or Veronica, do you guys have anything else to add for spotting either a really sustainable company or spotting greenwashing?
Yeah, I can jump in. So to go off of what Adila was saying, I think it's also just the approach to SKUs and categories that they're offering. So is a company thinking, you know, are they pumping out new product every week, every month? Is it seasonal? So like a big thing for us when we decided to really approach and sort of pivot our business model is that I realized that we have to have seasonless product. We can't just have product that's only good in January or February. And you know, we really need to invest in materials. I think the biggest thing and the most impact that a brand can have is using clean materials. So if we're doing that, you know, really investing in them where they can be used all throughout the year. And that helps brands too to be more sustainable. So there is less waste. So I think it's like really just comes down to shifting the approach, having fewer SKUs, you know, which contributes to less waste, really investing in pieces that are essential. That's really what we've been trying to focus on, is what can, you know, women wear all throughout the year, and different colors too, you know, that are like, that can work, where they're not just going to stuff their clothing in their closet and not see them or dispose of them. So I think it's good, you know, fast fashion obviously is very, very detrimental. So I think it's really important to just have a mind shift overall for brands, how they're approaching their categories, as well as consumers, of like when they're considering purchasing something, being like, okay, you know, will this last me? Can I wear it throughout the year? And is it a clean, you know, a clean material that's healthier for the planet and also for them?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Kayti, I love hearing you speak, because like that's, you know, definitely how all companies should think. And it's really fantastic hearing you say all that. And I definitely agree. And that's how we think as a company in a lot of ways as well. And for myself, for our brand, actually, we chose to do more, that's called essential pieces and seasonless pieces. You know, can be a black trousers, as I said, and not like the party dresses or the one-off things, you know, because of sustainability. And I tell people and my friends to buy secondhand or rent for those one-off items that you want. And then on spotting sustainable brands or greenwashing brands, I think I get really happy when consumers email me and ask me more questions. And I get excited. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start replying them and all that. And I think that's what it's all about, is asking like why and where and how and figuring out more. And when people ask me, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not writing that in our website, and I would add to it. And I think those are all great things. And in terms of the larger companies, how do we spot greenwashing? Is I think a few companies out there have launched one small collection that is sustainable, or a partnership that is something like that. But the majority of their business, they're not making any changes. And I think that's disappointing sometimes when I see that in the press. But there are bigger companies who are trying. It takes a bit longer time for them to steer, but we as consumers then have to give them even more pressure to make things happen faster, because they do have the power. And I actually also think that brands should get together and see if there's a collective power. Let's say, all of us here go to a zipper supplier and say, we need a sustainable zipper. When there's more of us asking for it, we're going to get it. If it's, one startup asking for it, they're like, they won't talk to us as much. So I think the industry getting together, collaborating is also very important.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I'm curious to hear too, how everyone else feels about the idea of increased transparency, and how, more transparency in the industry, whether it's between brands or between brands and customers, can help, kind of the issue of greenwashing and help make it a little bit less pervasive. Katie, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I think it really ties into education. And so for us, it's like Veronica was saying, is that there's such a learning curve just every single day. I feel like we're learning something new. So what we try to do is, as we are learning, we share it with our community. So we have a different series on our Instagram called like What the F, where we sort of go into different concepts or different materials and sort of unpack what they are. And for us too, we're really, I think education is so important to really help with greenwashing and transparency and making that connection for consumers. We recently launched our Dress Clean Advocate program, which we now have like 80 plus advocates, that it's all based on sharing information, educating them on issues in the fashion space, but not just the fashion space. So other issues too that are important. And I think also, I guess what comes to me too is that each brand has such a responsibility right now to sort of speak up. There's so many issues leading up to this election next week, which hopefully everyone has voted. But there's so many different things that we can be talking about. I think as brands, we have responsibilities to sort of speak up, for those issues that are important to us, that are maybe controversial, but we can use our platforms, in order to spread our mission and our values. Yeah. Was that the question? Did I answer that? Okay.
So do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay, so for me, Trent, I know I have so much in my head. I don't know about you, Katie, but I'm like, I have so much I want to express, but yeah, I get where you're coming from. So yeah, for me, transparency really is like definitely about education. That's kind of something that I've always loved doing. That's kind of why I wrote the book too. But I think another part about transparency is also just about storytelling and just like humanizing the apparel industry by really connecting your audience with who's making the product. Because if you don't know who's making it and how it's being made, I feel like people don't really value the product as much. Like if we have this misconception, when I say the word factory, a lot of consumers, which is totally understandable, they think that things are made by machines. But things are not made by machines. It doesn't matter if it's like made by like a big manufacturer, it's still made by people. It's very labor intensive. And I really believe that if you have more of an understanding of who's making your clothes and how how things are made, you'll appreciate and value your products more. And that's where people will understand how much they're paying for it. You know, like if you're buying a t-shirt at $10, well, that's kind of a red flag, because I have to pay the knitter, the weaver, the dyer, the sewer, I have to logistics. There's so much involved. There's duties for going into North America are like roughly 16 to 18%. Like that's crazy, you know? So people have to understand that, like, how things are made, and then we'll have more of an appreciation. Well, like, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna pay $50 for a t-shirt, you know, or $40. They have more of a value for what they're doing. So the more we like educate, as Katie says, and then like be more, I think, authentic with your brand story. So for the Good Tea, we have like a factory walkthrough. I think I did this about 8 years ago. I just have a handheld camera where I just kind of interviewed, you know, the factory. I tell stories. Like the factory we're making the Good Tea right now it's actually run by Franciscan nuns. And so I literally talk to these nuns every day on my WhatsApp. We video chat. Like I have a close relationship with them. Like they've made me mango curry. Okay, there's a bond there, and it's good curry. Okay. So anyway, sorry. Back to the question. But yeah, so it's just like building relationships and like telling, you know, the story with your audience. Like sometimes I do calls on my phone, and like I was in my robe at like 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and I still like posted that on Instagram to show people like, hey, this is like my merchandise, or this is working on your products. I've done factory walkthroughs. I show video. I tell stories. So sometimes I meet like on Zoom or just on the phone, the video. What's it called? Apple Video or whatever. Anyways, FaceTime. Sorry. So anyway, so then we like meet like once a month, and then I will interview one of the factory workers there. And so I get to know them. I ask them if they have any nicknames, like what is their definition of love, just to be able to connect you, the audience, with who's making their clothes. So these are kind of some of the things that I do to be more transparent about who's making the clothes. Like we're transparent completely where things are made, like the whole supply chain. But I think it also comes down to like relationships and how the brand is kind of advocating that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think fashion, the industry has done such a good job of glamorizing fashion and making it super beautiful and pretty, but a regular consumer, I think most people who are listening to this call would know how difficult it is to make a garment, and how many steps there are. And as Adila said, you know, there's the dyeing and the weaving and all these different types of factories. And I think that has not really been transparent to the consumers. And, you know, again, down to the trims, you know, we might be getting trims from China, but then the item might be being sewn together in Italy, but actually the raw material, you know, comes from Brazil or something like that. And that kind of carbon footprint can be very scary. And back to the horror story part, as a teenager, when I worked at my family's factories, one of my jobs as an intern was to measure the samples for a sweater. And, you know, almost every week I was like, why am I measuring the same thing? And every time it would be 3 items of the same thing. And then like I'll send it back to the factory and then send it back to America. And then I'm like, wait, I just measured this. Why am I measuring it again? But that's the amount of samples and number of times of samples that are needed before that garment even goes to production. And that actually is a lot of wastage, which, you know, we don't really tackle. Well, didn't tackle, but now there's 3D technology that can help with that. You know, everything can be digital. Of course, video is another way, but with 3D, we can reduce the amount of samples that we are making. And I think these are great things, but it's not transparent to the everyday consumer. And so we as brands have to educate. And part of it is the companies and brands saying, it used to be, this is my factory, this is my fabric, I'm not going to share any information with you. But now with sustainability, we need to get together to be open source and share, you know, and so that we can really make things that don't hurt the planet as much.
Right, totally. And it's interesting too, because like you were saying, fashion is obviously such a global industry, and there are so many players at it at different, parts of the garment's lifestyle, and that makes it difficult to collect good data about, clothes in general. And there isn't that much quality research going on the numbers. Like I remember one sort of stat or phrase that was passed along a lot a few years ago was like, fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world, and that was used everywhere. But it's like, I think that's since just been debunked and challenged, and there wasn't really any good data supporting that. So I'm curious how you think about the lack of data and how that might be contributing to the greenwashing issue, and how we can start to kind of move away from that and provide real validated numbers, when it comes to our clothing and how they're made. Veronica, you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, there is really a lack of data, and most brands don't really know where things are from, and so I think now there's technology like blockchain that is helping that, and collecting that information. But it's I think there's also standards in the industry that people are trying to set up. And I think, Higg Index is one of the big ones. And you can then also measure, like, are you really using less water and things like that. So yeah, I think standards and certifications always is a good process. Yeah.
Oh, can I add something? So actually, with regards to standards and certifications, so what's really nice about B Corp certification is they measure our impact. So we scored 80%, 88%, I believe. And every 3 years, we have to up our score. So I think that's one really great way, like brands can, measure their impact. And if you're shopping to see, like, what kinds of impact that they're making. Another thing that I wanted to share is that with the Good Tea, we're using a platform called Green Story, and these guys are amazing. So they take metrics of how things are made and where they're coming from, how they're shipped. We give them all the information, like of every style, like what the fabric consumption is and everything, and they visually tell consumers like how much pesticides you're avoiding, emissions you're avoiding, water you're conserving. I think there's one more, water emissions you're avoiding. Anyhow, and there's a calculator. So every product, we tell you what the impact is. So you can go to our website and you can check each style on the calculator. And then when you actually make a purchase, it'll tally it up for you. So if you made a few different purchases of different styles, it'll tell you what your impact is. So that's one great way. To see like how much of an impact is on like with regards to like data as a whole. I feel like it's so scary, like it's so hard, I think, for that information to be like centralized. I think just because nobody even understands their supply chain, but we do know for sure, like it's like facts here. You can see the landfills are piling up. It's, you can tell just by the environment, like just the climate change, there's a problem, obviously, but it's so hard to measure it. And yeah, I really hope that there's a solution or something that can come out of it soon. But I'm just really hoping that more brands like like H&M and the bigger guys that are really, have a huge impact are gonna do better. But I love brands like Eileen Fisher and Patagonia, because you can see their journey as a bigger brand, like what they're doing. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on data.
Yeah, I guess to chime in there too, there's so much, I guess, qualitative information out there. And, in terms of the numbers and metrics, it does feel like we all sort of jump on one statistic. And then there are complications in that, But I think what Adila was saying of how she's sort of analyzing her products and using Green Story, I think it's called, is so important. And for us too, at Mate, we're starting to do LCAs on each individual product, which is kind of similar to what she was describing, of really looking at our energy, water, toxicology, everything that goes into it. So there's an actual number that we can use to really track our impact. And I think like a great way too, or just looking at other brands that are doing like annual or even more frequent impact reports are very strong, because this stuff does take effort. It does take investment. It does take bandwidth and manpower. So brands that are able to do that, I think really stand out. And it's important, you know, not to just back up what you're doing qualitatively, but really to have numbers and figures that we can track, and, you know, use programs like the Higg index and different tools out there, you know. But then again, nothing's going to be perfect. So I think we can have, you know, try to achieve and sort of set a goal for doing the best that we can, but realize that it's always nuanced and it's always a bit complex when looking at these issues.
Totally. Yeah, it's a great point. And I feel like, you know, from what everyone's been saying, it's really about kind of mixing the qualitative with the quantitative, and, you know, keeping up with storytelling, but also backing up those claims, you know, where it's possible. So as we kind of look forward to the future of the fashion industry, you know, some of you have touched on this already, but do you see consumers, you know, what role do you see consumers playing in reducing the amount of greenwashing that's out there, and how can, you know, shoppers and citizens just be more engaged with the way that they buy clothes in general?
I'll go first. I actually, before I answer that, I think I get frustrated sometimes when big companies, not necessarily in fashion, but like CPG companies, when they push the blame totally on the consumers. You know, there's big cleaning product companies that say, oh, 60% of our carbon footprint comes from the consumer, you know, turning on the hot water. And I'm like, that's really not fair, because the businesses are not the ones who are offering enough options for consumers to be sustainable. And I think there is a responsibility for businesses to do that. So I really hope that there is a change. But I think as consumers, we are one person in a big world. But, you know, every time we buy something, every time we eat something, we are voting. I think collectively, then we have the power. Yeah.
Yeah, I think every purchase matters. Like Veronica was saying, is you are voting with your dollars every time you decide to bring something into your home. And I think like the biggest thing, you know, which I'm hopeful about, is like, look at how much change has happened in just the past 5 years in this space. So much. Like 7, 8 years ago, a lot of these conversations weren't being had, you know. So I think like as consumers become more aware and as they're asking more questions, there's so much power in that. And so I think with this, you know, next generation, especially younger people that are just so interested in sustainability and just the urgency of it all, I feel like it's never felt so urgent until this past year with everything going on, that I think it's hopeful, you know. And I think that consumers have so much power, and brands, you know, also have so much power, but they're really looking to look at the consumer behaviors that really, I think, dictates everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree that I think it's in the consumer's hands, because I can tell you a story. Like after the 2013 Rana building collapse, I'm not going to name them, but there's a bigger corporation that I went to go meet with the VP, and I had these awesome ideas of how I could help them, integrate more sustainability into their products and what they're doing. And like, she like flatly said out to me, well, you know what, our consumers won't buy it. That's not, we just care about the bottom line. Like, and like, she kind of said it to my face, even that like exactly what Katie said is that consumers have the power, and like whatever consumers want, that is what's going to drive the business. So yeah, I really believe that, you know what, every little dollar counts. Like, feel good when you're buying something, like feel good about your purchase, so like feel good like when you're making, supporting a small person, small business, supporting like anybody who's doing something sustainable, like buy from them, and do what you can. Like every little bit counts. So don't feel like, oh, I just bought a t-shirt. No, it really does make a difference. You may not see it, but I really want people to know that when they're doing the right decision, I want you to feel really good about it.
Right. Yeah, it's an important point. And we just got a great Q&A question come in that I would love to pose to you all. It's, do you think that the fact that brands can decide what sustainability is for themselves can lead to greenwashing?
I don't think so. I think greenwashing is more about like misinforming. I think that if as a brand, if you're kind of saying that, what your values are, and like, for example, I'll just give you an example. Some people are so pro, bamboo fabric, whereas I'm pro organic. But I tell you why I believe organic is the best. I don't believe in bamboo just because it uses a lot of chemicals to break down that into a fiber. And so you just kind of have to, but it still is a quickly renewable product, right? Everybody's trying their best, so you just have to really look at the brand, their values, their mission, and see what are they doing to back up what they're saying. And does that align with your values when you're purchasing a product?
I would say that I kind of wish there was better metrics in terms of defining sustainability, where there's so many different ways to look at it. But if there was at least buckets or a way to, I don't know exactly like who would be responsible for like saying yes, no kind of thing, and who could be coming up with this. Maybe it's a collective of brands too, that get together to try to really better determine what that word really means, and be able to quantify the data that is incorporated. But I do think that there is concern when there isn't a clear definition, then it just gets used, like the food industry, natural foods don't mean anything, but organic does, So I think like there's always potential for these buzzwords to get misused, and it gets a little bit tricky, even like with regenerative agriculture. There's some people out there kind of concerned about what that actually means. So yeah, I think it's complicated. I wish there was more of a clear definition, so brands and people alike can sort of weed out who is and who isn't.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if with some kind of definition or some kind of standard, it will also make people who are not yet in sustainability, make them change easier. Yeah. And I think, well, the fashion industry has gotten together. There's one called the Fashion Pact, where the brands are getting together and like getting a lot of data and educating, having outside third party non-fashion industry people also educating them. And I think those are all great things. And but questions that people ask can be all over the place. So some kind of standard would definitely be helpful. And sorry, one thing, I do have to go because my kids woke up from their sleep and I need to tend to them. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for having me on the panel, but I have to put them back to bed.
Thank you, Veronica.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to drop off. You guys continue. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, okay, so our next Zoom meeting, we can figure out that standard and get it all rolled out and ready to go and just solve the crisis. So yeah, I think we're nearing the end of the hour anyways, but I guess just for you two remaining, let's end on a high note and just kind of go over what's keeping you hopeful about the future of fashion.
I think for me, it would be, I think there's so much support right now, shopping local and trying not to buy from Amazon. And really, like, I can feel it since the whole COVID pandemic started. I just really feel like there's so much more care and thought into purchasing and people asking more questions. I just feel like, as bad as the pandemic is, I just really feel like something really good is going to come out of it this way. It's just like, people being more sustainable and mindful about their purchases. And we can already see that, I think, with, like consumer demand for like sustainable and just responsibly made products.
I totally agree with that. I think COVID sort of amplified and accelerated that mindset for people because we're all at home. We're all sitting with all of our stuff and looking at what's in our closets or just what's in our homes. And we're like, ugh, there is so much stuff. So I feel very hopeful right now. I think with just more awareness and people being more passionate about these issues and things like circularity coming about and really different companies addressing ways to approach it. And there's also just a lot more technology and innovation around different materials. I'm really hopeful that we can get away from synthetics and fabrics that are reliant on fossil fuels and contributing microplastics. So I feel like there are some cool innovations out there that hopefully we can, use materials that aren't just going to be so detrimental to people and the planet. I think that's like the biggest hope. And if we can have electric cars, if we can put people on the moon, I feel confident we can figure out the material issues that we have right now. So I think I feel good about what's sort of coming and just the rise in awareness from consumers in general.
The other thing I wanted to point out also is I love the whole campaign. I forget the name of the campaign, but when this whole COVID thing happened, so many of the bigger manufacturers started, especially in Bangladesh, the canceled orders. And so many influencers and people were really advocating for these canceled orders. And I had never seen this in so many years working in the industry. I'm like, wow, people are really having a voice now. And I'm sure that these larger corporations should feel ashamed. What are they doing? And without these consumers and people, influencers coming together and really saying, hey, you, what are you doing? They're not going to stop what they're doing. So I feel like, I'm hopeful about things, and there's definitely change happening.
Right. So the pay up movement, I know that was my first real exposure to just the magnitude of canceled orders, and it was incredibly shocking. Well, thank you guys so much again for joining us. And I know I learned a lot, so I really, really appreciate your time. And thank you so much for the Sustainable Fashion Forum for having us and helping get this information out there. I think it's incredibly important. So thank you guys so much again.
Thank you. And thanks